Christmas on BBC One. Cher stars in the Academy Award-winning film Moonstruck.
You waited for the right man the first time. Why didn't you wait for the right man again?
Because he didn't come.
I'm here.
You're late. I never seen a moon like that before.
Makes you look like an angel.
Moonstruck, Saturday at 10:05 on BBC One.
Working Mother Blues, Baby Boom with Diane Keaton in 10 minutes. And now the Christmas Day news on BBC One with Jill Dando.
Good evening. President Gorbachev wins a key vote and gains more power. As the Soviet Congress changes the constitution, Mr. Gorbachev says, "I don't have to prove that I'm not a dictator." And after today's storms, the weather forecasters warn there's more to come. The Soviet Congress of People's Deputies has voted President Gorbachev greater personal authority in his struggle against economic collapse and separatism. By a two-thirds majority, the deputies amended the Soviet constitution. The president can now enforce existing laws throughout the 15 republics by overruling national or regional ministers. But he failed to get the required majority to set up an inspectorate to enforce his rules.
Congress has handed Mr. Gorbachev the key powers that he insists are essential to sort out the economic chaos and prevent the disintegration of the Soviet Union. A complex series of votes began with the formal approval in principle of his Union Treaty. Deputies went on to vote for a new cabinet under President Gorbachev's direct control and the creation of a vice president. Radicals have expressed great concern about the powers Mr. Gorbachev is amassing. But during a break in proceedings, Mr. Gorbachev spoke to deputies face-to-face in an effort to convince them the constitutional changes were needed and to reassure those who are concerned he's becoming too dictatorial.
I think I don't have to prove, affirm or bring additional arguments. I'm a person who is made of democracy. I think it is well known in the country, it's well known in the world, and I don't think I have to prove it.
But the military hardliners who hounded Eduard Shevardnadze to the point of resignation hope Mr. Gorbachev will take a tough line against rebellious republics.
I am not afraid of concentration of power at all. The only thing which worries me is we don't know where we are going, where we are being led, or where our leader is led.
About half the amendments to the Constitution have been decided so far. There'll be further votes tomorrow. But Mr. Gorbachev has won the huge presidential powers he wants. Independent-minded republics who boycotted the proceedings will be more uneasy than ever as to how he will use them. Carol Walker, BBC News, Moscow.
Gale force winds and heavy rain brought havoc across Britain today, and more bad weather is forecast for tomorrow. In some of the worst incidents today, an oil rig supply ship sank off the coast of Great Yarmouth. Its crew was rescued, and those on board a Danish ship were rescued off Shetland in a force 10 storm. Near Chippenham, part of a church tower collapsed, and thousands were without electricity in Kent, Hampshire, Hereford and Worcester and Staffordshire.
5 crewmen were airlifted by helicopter from this chemical tanker which ran aground in gales near Milford Haven in Dyfed. The tanker was later pulled free from the rocks by tugs. The congregation of Kington St Michael Church in Wiltshire had an amazing escape when part of the tower crashed through the roof. 4 people were slightly hurt. The priest conducting the service was just a few inches away from the falling masonry. Thousands of homes were without electricity to cook Christmas dinner as the gales brought down power lines. And though the winds have died down, the forecasters say we can expect more bad weather tomorrow.
In her Christmas message, the Queen said the British troops in the Gulf were much in the nation's thoughts. She said she'd been much heartened by the almost unanimous opposition of the international community to the invasion of Kuwait.
The invasion of Kuwait was an example on an international scale of an evil which has beset us at different levels in recent years. Attempts by ruthless people to impose their will on the peaceable majority.
In his last Christmas Day sermon before he retires next month, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Robert Runcie, restated his view that war in the Gulf could be justified only as a last resort when all other means of persuasion had failed. Pope John Paul, in his Christmas message, said that a Gulf war would be an adventure with no return. Without mentioning Kuwait by name, he called for respect for the rights of peoples and nations. Two Irish businessmen who've just returned from Kuwait say more Kuwaitis have been murdered by Iraqi soldiers since the Western hostages left earlier this month. They say the Iraqis are angry that the Kuwaitis sheltered so many Westerners.
Paul Kennedy and Patrick Doer left Kuwait a week ago, 5 days after the last Western evacuation. In that period, the two Irishmen saw a vicious Iraqi crackdown.
I think that the Iraqis were very surprised that there was 500 or 600 people in hiding, Westerners still in hiding in Kuwait, when Saddam said everybody could leave, and these people came out of the woodwork, and they've taken their anger out on the Kuwaiti population.
Iraq's response, he found out, was the summary execution of people, 5 his close friends accused of hiding foreigners.
They would call the family out and choose one young man, accuse him probably of either helping foreigners or being a member of the resistance or something, and then just shoot him, usually under the chin or in the back of the head.
The Irishman confirmed that Kuwaiti babies died after being ripped from incubators. Those still alive were suffocated inside plastic bags.
Saddam Hussein has repeated his call for a peaceful dialogue, blaming the Gulf crisis on American aggression. He said again that his priority was the liberation of Palestine. Iraqi Christians in Baghdad have been attending services to pray for peace. From there, our Foreign Affairs editor John Simpson reports.
The Iraqi media today has been full of Saddam Hussein's message for the Christmas season, which is essentially an appeal for peace in the Gulf. He also sent flowers and a Christmas cake to most Western embassies, though the British said they hadn't got anything. Not that there are very many British people left here. At the new British club, the local staff kept the bar open just in case anyone dropped in. No one did. Most of the million or so Iraqi Christians spend Christmas in much the same way as people in the West do. The Raid family gathered in their sitting room for a pre-lunch celebration. Out in the kitchen, meanwhile, their Christmas dinner was seething in the pot. It was the head of a sheep. The British diplomatic staff here were more conventional. There's one British man in Iraq who can't spend Christmas as he'd like. Ian Richter, a businessman serving a long prison sentence. And Brian Duffy from Ireland is in jail for trying to leave Iraq illegally. But they aren't forgotten.
And could I also wish everyone a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year.
John Simpson, BBC News, Baghdad.
British troops and other Allied forces in the Gulf have been celebrating Christmas, at the same time remaining on a high state of alert.
America's Christmas present to Saddam Hussein, delayed for delivery until at least mid-January, includes the armament of these Apache tank-killing helicopters, moving out into positions where they will be able to take part in the sudden and violent attack that has been promised. For the build-up of forces, Christmas is a day like any other. For the troops on the ground, like Britain's 7th Armoured Brigade, it has been and still is special. Across the desert, Santa of Arabia made the rounds of units where officers were regularly doing sentry duty while the men who serve under them relaxed.
We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Among the Americans too, attempts by the authorities to mute the celebrations for political reasons ran into the determination of the soldiers themselves to have their Christmas anyway.
They told me by
But training for the expected war resumes tomorrow. Martin Bell, BBC News, Saudi Arabia.
Christmas has returned to Albania after a communist ban lasting more than 20 years. Religious freedom was introduced last month at the same time as political reforms. Thousands went to midnight mass in the town of Shkodra, where there were anti-communist riots 10 days ago. With a rare report from inside Albania, Bill Hamilton.
To 3 million Albanians, never mind the rare eye of an outsider, it seemed as though the hard face of Europe's last totalitarian state had been turned on its head. For this time, the soldiers were guarding the vandalized communist headquarters in the northern town of Squadra and the nearby radio station where last week demonstrators rioted as the push for political reform took a violent turn. But if they were expecting more trouble, then all Squadra wanted was to celebrate Christmas for the first time in over 20 years. "10,000 filled the graveyard of the Catholic Church, the first to be reopened in a country which forbade all public expression of faith. Father Simon Ubani's defiance cost him 26 years in jail. Now, as a choir sings from a renovated side chapel, he was having to explain the story of Christ's coming to a generation who had never been to Mass before. Others, in their old age, whose faith had been suppressed for so long, could easily identify with both the message and the suffering of their parish priest."
And that's all from the newsroom this evening. From all of us here, a very happy Christmas.
Good evening. The weather hitting the headlines again today. Not only some very strong and gusty winds, but lots of rain as well. We're going to have virtually a repeat performance later tonight and tomorrow. This is the low pressure area that's already beginning to develop. That'll begin to sprint its way in towards the northern tip of Scotland by tomorrow lunchtime. Just look how many isobars there are across the length of the country. Gives an indication of just how stormy the weather is likely to be. And those weather fronts too, so there'll be rain as well. There's already been a warning issued for later tonight and tomorrow. Hazardous driving conditions brought about by those strong and very gusty winds. Winds gusting to 70, maybe 80 miles per hour, obviously causing damage, and the heavy rain as well causing extra problems. The first of the rain pushing into the western side of the country then overnight tonight. Generally dry on the eastern side. There could just be the odd shower for a time this evening on the eastern side of Scotland. But it's in sheltered spots in central and eastern areas we'll see temperatures at their lowest. But out to the west, fairly mild, and the wind strengthening all the time. In fact, as I say, quite a stormy sort of day, gales in many areas. That then pushing the rain rapidly across the whole country, followed by lots of those showers. That's all from me.
Boxing Day on BBC One.
Traveling long.
At 5:25, Russ Abbott flies in for another joke. Then at 6:05, Back to the Future.
Now I need your help to get back to the year 1985.
At 8, Bergerac is back.
Monsieur Bergerac, other villages they have problems, but we do not expect it here in Saint-Armand.
At 9:40, Smith & Jones. Comedy with absolutely no mention of Christmas. And at 10:25, horror in Poltergeist II.
You're back!
Toto, live in Paris at 11:55. That's Boxing Day on BBC One.
And now, our film for Christmas night on BBC One. Diane Keaton stars as J.C. Wyatt, a successful career woman who has to come to terms with an unusual inheritance in the romantic comedy Baby Boom.